Hey guys, welcome or welcome back to my channel. I'm Manisha, and today I want to talk about some book recommendations. So I feel like finally it's cold outside, you need to bundle up, layer up, otherwise you're gonna lose a digit, and at least where I live, it's very cold, and I just feel like I need some good books to get through those cold months personally. So I thought I would do a recommendation video and then also talk a little bit about what my TBR looks like. Yeah, so first off, I gotta start with my more paranormal and, more vampire-y, witchy kind of books because Halloween is in fact right around the corner, which is kind of wild, but here we are, almost at the end of 2024. So, of course, my first recommendation is Bride. So, I feel like, one, this book has amazing plot building, amazing relationship dynamics that are explored in this, like, just so well. And it's just a lot more than just, like, a vampire werewolf romance, in my opinion. I think Ali Hazelwood did, like, a really phenomenal job of actually giving this book a plot. And it was just very enjoyable. I don't want to, like, go off too much because I've definitely talked about this book before, but I rated this 4.75, and it was kind of a surprise because I don't think I've rated any of the STEMinist books that highly, but I loved this. It was such a great read. And it was just fun, and it just has a little bit of paranormal that you might need for, a little bit less spooky, but a little bit more just fun Halloween vibes. So the next book I have is Masters of Death by Olivie Blake. And of course, Olivie Blake is known very well for the Atlas Six, but I feel like her subsequent works were not getting as much hype. And do I think this book is incredible, amazing, show-stopping? No, but I do think that the concept of this book is very interesting. It follows a vampire real estate agent who is trying to sell this house that's a bit more of a hard sell because it's haunted by this ghost, and of course as a vampire she sees this ghost causing all this havoc, and so they kind of strike a deal where she's gonna help him figure out why he's got murdered, how he got murdered, and just then he'll move on and let her sell the house. But the catch is that this ghost is actually the godson of death, and we go off on a little bit more of an abstract journey after that, which kind of, maybe I was just not smart enough to understand it. I don't know. There was a lot of things going on, but I do think it's definitely worth a try. It's a very hard book to really explain what's actually happening, but the basic tagline was what I said. But yeah, definitely give it a try. And if nothing else, just this artwork is so phenomenal. Like, I think, what's her name? Little Chimera? Or I forget what her name is, but isn't this the most gorgeous artwork you've ever seen in your life? Fantastic. And then to kind of wrap up my spooky recommendations, because there's really only 5 more days until Halloween right now, so obviously you can't read all of these, but I mean, maybe you can, I don't know. But my final recommendation is The Diviners, and I feel like these were like really popular in like 2013, but I didn't read them until 2018? 2019? Something like that. And I've only read the first, and then I kind of am somewhere in this book, but I haven't picked it up in a while. But I'm really not sure why, because when I finished this book, I thought it was really, really good. It follows I hate when I say good. It was really, really interesting concepts where it didn't really follow where I thought it was gonna go. So we start out following our main character, Evie, and she kind of goes through an event in her hometown in Ohio or Oregon, and she kind of ends up coming out with these psychic powers where when she touches something, she ends up kind of getting more intuition about the object or the person it belongs to. And I think this causes a little bit of a hubbub in her town, and so she ends up being sent off to New York City. And we're in the 1930s, so this is very like flapper girls, a lot of jazz music, I think, a lot of music and clubs, and prohibition is going on, and it's a lot of very interesting things that are all happening context-wise. And so she ends up going to live with her uncle who runs the occult museum in New York. And of course, you know, there's a love interest. He's the assistant to her uncle. But there's also a string of murders that have been going on, and then Evie and her best friend end up kind of getting involved because Evie's a little bit of a busybody. And they kind of get involved, and there's this basically spirit that is coming back, and he's run a cult in the past, like before the 1930s, which I can't even imagine, but in the past. And I just feel like there was also these other two characters that I feel like are going to come more into play in these books. But this was kind of scary, I'm not going to lie. I also don't really love spirits. Like, it does freak me out. So, was this like a 10 out of 10, like I was quivering and trembling? No, but I feel like with books it's really hard to give a scary atmosphere or aspect to a book because you just look around and you're like, I'm fine. I'm chilling in my room, or I'm chilling on the sofa, or whatever at school. Like, I just feel like Libba Bray did a really good job of actually conveying how scary or tense the situations that they got into were, and then also getting across some of that cultural context of what's happening with different ethnic groups at this time. So we have one main character who is Chinese American, and then we have another male character who is African American, and kind of how they're tying into the story together. I think I'm kind of convincing myself to finish the series. And then, you know, to just end off my little recommendations on a little bit more of a positive, cutesy note, you know, for the, you know, fun adventure kind of aspect of Halloween where you're just having a silly, goofy time, I feel like I gotta shout out the Once Upon a Broken Heart trilogy. And we're following the main character, Evangeline Fox, who finds out that her boyfriend is gonna go and like marry someone else. And this is set in like kind of medieval-ish times. We're kind of getting that very storybook fairy tale vibes. So imagine though that timing, context, vibes. And she ends up striking a deal with the King of Hearts, who kind of forces her into a bargain to get what she wants. And this bargain ends up having some unpredicted outcomes. And we just kind of go from there. It's just a fun time. The stakes are fairly low, in my opinion. Like, we know that it's gonna be all good. But it does have a very strong emotional aspect. You do get pretty attached to the main characters. I feel like the male love interest in this book was quite good. I feel like I was attached to him. He was really making me cry. But, well, he wasn't making me cry, but he was pulling the heartstrings for sure. Definitely silly, goofy time. Little fairy tale spooky vibes. Okay, and then, you know, kind of transitioning out of spooky and more into just, it's giving autumnal. It's kind of giving autumnal, but it's kind of giving, like, cold in the winter sense as well, in my opinion. Like, for all of the next books. But I feel like this author had her moment in like 2013 and then again in like 2019 when she released a second book. But I'm just really surprised she's not as popular anymore, because I feel like she really, I don't know, I just feel like her books would have like come back into popularity with book talk and stuff, but surprisingly didn't. So I hope that at least one person tries out her writing that has either barely heard of her or like has just been meaning to pick her up. So the first book, The Night Circus. So the author is Erin Morgenstern, and this is her book that came out, I think 2011, but it got really popular on BookTube like back in the day. And we're following these two children that are chosen to compete against each other, and they're raised by two men, and they end up being kind of trained to do this very elaborate magic. And the setting is the night circus, and it's basically this circus that appears out of nowhere, and it's this very like well-renowned circus in this world. It was just very atmospheric. I feel like there's a lot of really good writing put into these side characters as well, and I can always really appreciate that, because I feel like, of course, that makes a story feel more full and real and captivating. I do feel like there was a little bit of a drag, maybe around the 60-70%, where it got a little too long, a little bit too draggy, but I think for the actual vibes of this book, immaculate. And then we have The Starless Sea. And this book came out in 2019, and it is just incredible. If you can find this on Libby or like wherever you get your audiobooks, it is just, I feel like very rarely do I read an audiobook and I'm just like, I'm sat. Like, I can't, like, I have to be doing something when I'm reading an audiobook, but this, I can just, like, I could just zone out and listen to this story unfold, and that's like such a rare feeling, I feel, for me personally. It is just, I don't even know how to describe it. The writing is lyrical, and I really, really don't like lyrical writing, but this book just made it work. It's an ode to fantasy and adventure readers. It's following this graduate student named Ezra Mills, and he ends up in this place where he's reading this book, and it has this collection of stories, and he starts reading one story, and it's his life. It's about his life. And of course, a little freaked out, but he ends up becoming the target of this group who's trying to find him, find this book. And he ends up on the run and transported to this world of tales and storybooks, and it's just, this book evokes such strong and beautiful imagery. I feel like this book is not a very novel concept, because what person doesn't dream of falling into a storybook land? But the execution is just very well thought out. It's very kind of windy, and it's not a linear path, but it's all like leading to something. And it's just a very like a book you can read very like slowly and just still enjoy. It still feels like things are happening, because it's a very like reflective. If you're still in thought girl fall, I feel like this book would really resonate with you. It's a lot about self-discovery and kind of thinking about your past and how that made you. Okay, and then a few recommendations just for more like vibes, I think. Of course, you know, dark academia, I feel, is the vibes in just fall in general and just winter in general. So I, of course, have to take the opportunity to promote Babel. Not that it needs any promotion. I think it's won many, many awards. It's like everywhere on BookTube, Book Talk, whatever. But if you have not read this book yet, please do. It follows Robin Swift, who is, at the beginning of this book, a young child in Canton, and he is surrounded by his dying mother and caretaker, and he ends up being found by this strange man who comes to find him, and is offered the choice to either stay in Canton, die, or get on a ship and leave everything he's ever known to go to Britain. So, of course, he's a child. He chooses to live. And we're basically following Robin Swift as he is trained very rigorously in many languages to enter into Oxford's Institution for Translation, where he's going to learn how to harness the magic in this world, which is translation. So basically in this world, the kind of fantasy aspect of it comes from the fact that when you translate from one language to another, the meaning that's kind of lost in between that translation manifests in magic. And so that's basically how the British Empire is keeping power over all its colonies and advancing themselves at such a rapid rate. And this book obviously deals with a lot more than that. We're talking about obviously colonization and kind of the identity you may take on as a colonized people and as someone that's more integrated into your colonizer's culture. But phenomenal. I think everyone already knows, but I just have to take a moment to shout out Babel. It's always just an incredible read. I think this is a book that you just reread periodically throughout your life. Not that I have reread it yet, but it definitely strikes me as that kind of book. My next recommendation is manga, so it's Orange. The series follows a girl who ends up receiving a letter from her future self warning her to befriend this new kid in class and has a good time in high school because in the future he has exited this world. We're following this girl as she tries to prevent what her future self is telling her will happen. And it is just very cute. It's very emotional. And then following on the kind of manga graphic novel, I still have not fully learned the difference, but anyways, but it's witchy. And I think you can actually read this online because I believe I read it online. It's on the author's website, if I'm not mistaken. But basically it's this world where this length of your hair indicates how powerful you are. But this young girl, on the day where they are basically categorized on how powerful they are, finds that her hair is way, way too long. And this ends up threatening the kind of authority figures in this world, and she ends up having to go on the run. The art style is amazing. The vibes of it, incredible. And then, of course, I could not recommend this series in a video where I'm literally talking about frosty, chilly vibes. And it's the Bear and the Nightingale trilogy. This series is it's so, like, it's such a good time. I feel like you get everything you need. You have a little bit of romance that's not like the main plot, but it's still really good. You have such a strong magic system. You have a strong heroine. I love it so much. This is taking place in medieval Russia, and we're following our character Vasya, who is living in this very tiny village. And of course, in medieval times, spiritualism, very important, and, you know, it's considered integral to keeping your crops going, you know, avoiding misfortune in general. And the thing is that little Vasya can see all these spirits, so she knows they're real, and she interacts with them on the regular. So she is very, you might say, even more she's even more invested in the spiritual, keeping up with the kind of rituals and spiritual well-being of her village's kind of spirit population, and she knows how they are actually playing an integral role in the well-being of all these villagers. However, when Vasya is young, her mother ends up dying, and her father ends up remarrying this woman who grew up in Moscow, where the rise of Christianity has started more prevalently, and this new wife brings a lot of those Christian values into this little town, this little village. And this ends up causing the villagers to kind of start avoiding doing these more ritualistic things that are, helping the spirits stay healthy and be productive in the well-being of this village. And so as a result, the crops start failing, misfortune starts plaguing this village, and all these things are happening. But as this is happening, the new wife ends up becoming more and more strict in her Christian beliefs and imposing them on Vasya and all of her siblings and in the household. And it's just, it ends up being a whole mess. And what starts happening is that there's this darker, stronger force that's starting to rise up. I don't know. It's kind of like a girl power book, but it's just like so much more. I just feel like atmospherically incredible, storytelling incredible. It's just okay. And then we're gonna now talk about my TBR. So most of these books I have not read yet. I just kind of found them and I thought that sounds interesting. And so yeah, there's gonna be a lot less ranting and being like, oh my gosh, love this book now. So the first book though, I have like started reading this. I think maybe I've gotten maybe like 40 pages, and I have not gotten that far, and then I've DNF'd it. And I have tried to reread this book, or I have the intention of reading this book, like, every spooky season, because this is supposed to be like thriller, it's supposed to be horror, it's supposed to be like very like chilling. Am I gonna cope well with this? I don't know. But anyways, it's House of Leaves, and this book is heavy, so it's a long book, and I'm just a little scared. I'm scared both of the length of this book and also of the content. It basically follows this young family who moves into this home that is way bigger on the inside than it looks like it is on the outside. And that doesn't sound scary, but I definitely gotta read it this year. I feel like, you know, every year it just stares at me and I'm like, it would be wrong to read this at any other time of year. I feel like, so I gotta. So the next book I have on this list is The Graveyard Shift by M.L. Rio. I have never read We Were Villains because it does not interest me. However, that also means I don't know what her writing style is. I don't know what anything is about this book besides the summary, obviously. And so we'll see. I hope I find a new author that I just love, and I just, you know, who knows? So again, I didn't really know much, so apparently, according to the Goodread reviews, it's giving atmospheric, it's giving eerie. And does that not equate to Halloween? If that doesn't, I don't know what does. So we're following this group of night shift workers. So I think we have an Uber driver, nurse, bartender, and I think maybe one or two more people. And they all witness this giant hole in this churchyard. And I guess as they're leaving, they see the gravedigger come back. And they decide, you know what, such a silly, goofy time following this random man. Dug a hole in a church graveyard. And you know what? Okay. So as they're following him, they start to connect the dots that he might be connected to these weird occurrences in the town. And then I have a Maureen Johnson. Also, just side note, if you haven't read Truly Devious, amazing. I think, in my opinion, it's a Good Girl's Guide to Murder. Anyways, so she has released a new YA mystery, and it follows this girl who ends up starting a fire in a home, and then loses her girlfriend, and then now is like giving house tours of this house that was really popular in the 1900s because it had, you know, deaths happening there. And do I know where the mystery is coming in here? No. But I trust Maureen Johnson. I'm gonna give it a try. The next book I'm interested in reading is Tender Beasts by Liselle Sambury. And she, I think, released this maybe the beginning of this year or like last year. But it's following our main character, Sunny, and she ends up witnessing this murder, and the prime suspect is her brother. And then she ends up wanting to kind of prove his innocence, so she keeps digging into this murder, and a lot of kind of ugly things are starting to come out about her entire family. And so she ends up having to kind of grapple with if she wants to kind of keep all of these secrets undercover and protect her family, or potentially prove the innocence of this brother that she doesn't really know that well. And you know what? That sounds so good. Then a little bit like a vibey read. So I have a fellow book bestie, and she read this book, and when I saw that like she had her little review down, she rated it like 4.5 stars. I was intrigued. And so I am going to, you know, put it on my TBR, of course, because I am a highly influenceable reader. So it is Days at the Morisaki Bookshop. So what I'm gathering from this is it's very like self-growth and just kind of finding yourself a little bit. And I feel like winter seasons, because you're just like naturally wanting to be inside more, you just have more time to like reflect. It's also like just a time of change, you know, you're setting more goals because you feel like, you know, this is the time. And this book seems a lot like that, where her boyfriend ends up breaking up with her, and as she finds out that he was cheating on her and is now like getting married, or is like staying with the person that he was cheating on her with. So she ends up packing up and leaving to go live with her uncle, who runs a bookstore. And then also for this book, a lot of the reviews are saying that the writing is kind of simplistic and soothing, and it really makes you think even after you've put down the book. And I just want a book like that. Like, I haven't really had a book that followed me for a really long time in a while. And the next book is one where I kind of am just interested in it based on the author. So it's A Song to Drown Rivers by Liang. And she has really interesting concepts for her YA literary fictions. So I thought, let me just give her new young adult historical fiction a try. So A Song to Drown Rivers is following this girl who is growing up in a village, but she's considered extremely, extremely beautiful, and this seems like a kind of boon from a goddess or god. And she catches the eye of this military advisor, and they end up kind of teaming up, and he trains her to become the spy because they're attempting to topple this rival kingdom. I think the stakes are high. I think romance, obviously, it's a YA, and it's just good vibes. I feel like it's just good YA vibes. Last book I have on my TBR here is The Spell Shop by Sarah Beth Durst. And the sole reason I have this book on here is because as a kid I had this book by her, and it was about this little girl who, like, her dad ends up going missing, and her mom's like a storybook character, but she doesn't know that, and all of these weird things keep happening to her that are like storybook related, and then she ends up on this epic quest to save her mom. Iconic in my childhood. So this book, The Spell Shop, is following this librarian who is a librarian of this library of magical books, but she ends up getting like cast out for some reason, and she has to go back to her hometown, and she ends up opening a little bit of an illegal spell shop for this town. And you know, there may or may not be a neighbor that keeps trying to help her, ask her what she needs, fix her house for her. Like, it just seems like such a cozy fantasy, and I'm ready. Okay, some honorable mentions, just because, you know, I have to like really get in all of those books that I could potentially read and I'm interested in. So of course, you know, in the fall time, what do you want to read? A classic. So I really am interested in reading Pride and Prejudice, because I feel like the movie clips have just been coming up more and more often. I just hear more and more people talking about it, and I just want to read the book. I've been meaning to read this book for like 2 years now. I don't know what's going on, what's the holdup. I'm gonna just read it. So Pride and Prejudice, and I also want to read Frankenstein. I feel like now is the time to read Frankenstein, if there was a time. And then of course it is fantasy reader fall, so I have to read Adventures of Amina El-Sarafi. I don't know why. I was like absolutely burning through the audiobook, and then I think it had to be returned. But that book, phenomenal. Okay, I feel like I've been yapping. It is time for me to, in fact, wrap it up. I would be so honored if you want to tell me what you're reading for fall, and winter. Honestly, any cold season that you're reading these books in, let me know what you're reading, because I love book recommendations. And of course, I love to talk about books. So let me know what you're reading, please. And I appreciate you watching so much. And I will see you next time. Bye!